The gunshot that rang out across Whispering Creek wasn't meant to kill, but it silenced every soul in the dusty main street as effectively as if it had. Helena Norwood froze mid-stride, her heart hammering against her corset as she watched her father lower his smoking revolver, his message to the townsfolk crystal clear. No one would interfere with his plans for his only daughter. It was the summer of 1878, and at 20 years old, Helena had long since given up on fairy tales. The Colorado Territory was no place for dreams, especially not for a woman whose worth was measured by the advantageous marriage she could secure. Yet here she stood, clutching her market basket with white knuckles, watching her father's theatrical demonstration of authority with a mixture of horror and resignation. "Come along, Helena," Barrett Norwood called out, his voice carrying the confident tone of a man who owned half the valley and knew it. "We have important matters to discuss at home." The important matter, as Helena well knew, was her impending betrothal to Jasper Montgomery, a man 3 decades her senior with a fortune that rivaled her father's and a reputation for burying 3 wives already. The thought made her stomach turn, but she followed obediently, aware of the watchful eyes of the townspeople tracking her every step. Among those eyes was a pair of startling blue ones, belonging to a man Helena had noticed leaning against the hitching post outside the general store. Unlike the others who had averted their gaze when her father fired that warning shot, this stranger had maintained his steady observation, a slight furrow between his brows, the only indication that he'd registered the commotion at all. Cole Pritchard had not planned on staying in Whispering Creek for more than a night. He'd been trailing a herd north toward Wyoming when he'd split off to handle some private business, namely, delivering a letter to the sister of his former trail boss who'd fallen to fever 2 months past. But the unmistakable tension in the small town's atmosphere had caught his attention, as had the striking figure of the young woman now being marched home by the man with the smoking gun. "That's Barrett Norwood," the shopkeeper informed Cole when he inquired, keeping his voice low. "Richest man in 3 counties. That's his daughter, Helena. Word is he's finalizing arrangements with old Montgomery from Denver. Wedding's set for month's end." Cole nodded, betraying nothing of his thoughts as he paid for his supplies. But something about the glimpse of quiet defiance in Helena's eyes as she'd passed had stirred an unexpected protectiveness in him. He'd seen that look before in horses about to be broken by cruel hands, in men faced with unjust hanging. It was the look of someone who deserved better than the fate being thrust upon them. "Montgomery, you say?" Cole asked casually. "That wouldn't be Jasper Montgomery?" "The very same," the shopkeeper confirmed. "Mean old coot, but wealthy as sin. 3rd richest man in Colorado Territory, they say." "4th," Cole corrected automatically, then smiled at the shopkeeper's surprised expression. "I've had dealings with the top 5, none too pleasant." What Cole didn't mention was that Jasper Montgomery had once tried to hang him for horse theft when Cole had rightfully reclaimed a stallion Montgomery had acquired through dubious means. Only the timely intervention of a U.S. Marshal had saved Cole's neck. The old man wouldn't recognize him now 6 years, and a full beard made for a decent disguise, but Cole recognized the pattern of a man who collected beautiful things simply to prove he could own them. The Norwood estate sat on a gentle rise overlooking the town, a sprawling testament to Barrett Norwood's success in the cattle and mining industries. Helena sat stiffly in her father's study, her hands folded in her lap as he paced before her. "Montgomery will be here in 3 days," Barrett announced, pouring himself a generous whiskey. "He's agreed to all terms. The wedding will take place the following Sunday. It's more than a fair arrangement, Helena. You'll want for nothing." "Except love," she replied quietly. "Except choice." Barrett slammed his glass down, amber liquid sloshing over the rim. "Love. What has love ever built? Does love dig mines or raise cattle? Does love secure your future when drought comes or when the market crashes?" He leaned forward, his voice softening slightly. Your mother loved poetry and wildflowers and died leaving us with nothing but debts. I built all this from dust and determination. Mother loved you, Helena countered. That wasn't her failing. The slap came swiftly, stinging her cheek and bringing tears to her eyes, not from pain, but from the crushing realization that her father saw her as nothing more than another asset to be leveraged. You will marry Montgomery, Barrett stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. The arrangements are final. I suggest you spend these next days preparing to be a dutiful wife, rather than indulging in childish romanticism. When he left her alone, Helena moved to the window, staring out at the vast landscape stretching toward the mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay a different life, one she would never know. A single tear tracked down her cheek as she resigned herself to her fate. Cole, meanwhile, had taken a room at the modest hotel in town, claiming an interest in local investments to explain his extended stay. Over a meal at the hotel's small restaurant, he gathered more information about Barrett Norwood and his iron grip on both his business empire and his daughter. Poor girl hasn't had an easy time since her mother passed, the hotel owner's wife confided as she refilled Cole's coffee cup. Barrett kept her in that finishing school back east until last year. Brought her home just to marry her off, if you ask me. That Montgomery fellow visited twice this spring. Never spoke 2 words to Helena that anyone saw. Just inspected her like she was a prized heifer. Cole maintained an expression of polite interest, though inwardly his resolve was hardening. He had no particular ties to this town or to Helena Norwood, but the injustice of her situation resonated with his own history of fighting against men who believed their wealth entitled them to whatever or whomever they desired. The opportunity to speak with Helena came unexpectedly the following morning. Cole had risen early, as was his habit from years on the trail, and was exercising his horse on the road that skirted the edge of the Norwood property when he spotted her. She was seated on a fallen log beside a small creek, sketchbook in hand, entirely absorbed in her drawing. He approached slowly, ensuring his horse's footfalls were audible enough not to startle her. When she looked up, alarm flashed across her features before settling into cautious curiosity. "Good morning, Miss Norwood," Cole said, tipping his hat. "I apologize for disturbing you." Helena studied him, recognition dawning. "You're the man who was watching yesterday, when my father—" She trailed off, her cheeks coloring slightly. "Cole Pritchard," he offered with a slight bow from the saddle. "And yes, I was there. Your father makes quite an impression." A small, rueful smile touched her lips. "That he does." She closed her sketchbook and regarded him more carefully. "You're not from Whispering Creek." "Just passing through," Cole confirmed, dismounting. "Though the scenery has proven more compelling than I anticipated." He gestured to her sketchbook. "You're an artist?" The simple question seemed to surprise her, as if few people bothered to inquire about her interests. "Not really, it's just something I enjoy. My father considers it a frivolous pastime." Cole led his horse to the creek's edge to drink. "I've found that men who consider art frivolous are usually afraid of the truths it might reveal." Helena's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a rather philosophical observation from a man who looks like he makes his living on horseback." "A fair assessment," Cole laughed. "Though I've had my share of quiet nights under the stars with only books for company. A man can learn a lot between cattle drives if he's so inclined." Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Helena found herself sharing thoughts she'd long kept private: her love of painting landscapes, her dreams of seeing the great cities of the East again, but on her own terms, her fear of being trapped in a loveless marriage to a man who viewed her as a possession. "Why don't you leave?" Cole asked eventually. "The world's a big place." Helena sighed, gazing across the creek toward the mountains. "With what money? To go where? My father controls everything. I have no skills that would earn my keep, No relatives who would take me in against his wishes. She shook her head. And he would find me. Barrett Norwood does not lose what he considers his. Cole was silent for a moment. What if you had help? Her eyes snapped to his, wary yet unable to completely hide the spark of hope his words had kindled. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Let's just say I have a particular dislike for men like Jasper Montgomery, Cole replied, his expression hardening momentarily before softening again. And I believe everyone deserves the chance to write their own story. Before Helena could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats caused her to jump to her feet. That will be Thomas, our foreman, she said hurriedly. He checks the property boundaries each morning. You should go. He reports everything to my father. Cole nodded, swinging smoothly back into the saddle. Tomorrow? Same time? He asked quietly. Helena hesitated only briefly before nodding. I can't promise anything. I'm not asking for promises, Cole assured her. Just a conversation. As he rode away, Helena found herself watching until he disappeared around the bend, wondering why the brief encounter had left her feeling more alive than she had in years. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with no hint of the gathering storm that would soon engulf them all. Helena slipped out earlier than usual, her sketchbook tucked under her arm as always, though drawing was the furthest thing from her mind. She found Cole already waiting by the creek, his tall form silhouetted against the rising sun. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, his voice revealing nothing of the tension that had kept him awake much of the night, planning and discarding various scenarios. Neither was I, Helena admitted. This is madness. I don't even know you. Fair enough, Cole replied, gesturing for her to sit on the fallen log while he remained standing. What would you like to know? Over the next hour, Cole shared more of his history than he had with anyone in years. He told her about growing up on a small Texas ranch, losing his parents to a fever that swept through their county when he was 16, making his way as a ranch hand and eventually a trail boss. He spoke of the endless skies of the open range, the camaraderie of good men on long drives, and his dream of someday having a place of his own, not an empire like her father's, but enough land to raise horses and live honestly. What he didn't mention was the reputation he'd earned for standing against the powerful men who tried to squeeze out smaller ranchers, or the price that had been on his head more than once, when those men found legal means of intimidation insufficient. Some stories weren't meant for the soft light of morning. And what about you? Cole asked eventually. If you could choose any life, what would it look like? The question caught Helena off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. I would travel, she said after a moment's thought. Not aimlessly, but with purpose. I would paint the great vistas of the West and the architectural wonders of the East. I would meet people who create beauty through words or music or images. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, as if the very act of articulating her dreams made them more real. And would you do this alone? Cole asked, his tone carefully neutral. Helena's eyes met his. I've always assumed I would have to. Women alone in this world face challenges. They do, Cole agreed, though the right companion can make both the challenges and the joys more meaningful. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had voiced directly. Helena looked away first, suddenly conscious of how improper this meeting would appear to others, yet unable to regret it. My father expects Montgomery's arrival tomorrow, she said quietly. The wedding is planned for Sunday. Cole nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. That gives us 4 days. 4 days for what? Helena asked, both hope and apprehension coloring her voice. Cole stepped closer, taking her hand in a gesture that should have been forward, but somehow felt like the most natural thing in the world. 4 days to decide if you want a different ending to this story. And if so, to make it happen. Their eyes locked, and Helena felt a strange certainty settle over her. This man, this virtual stranger, was offering her the one thing no one else ever had: a choice. "Meet me here tomorrow," she said finally. "I need time to think." Cole nodded, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Until tomorrow, then." What neither of them realized as they parted ways was that they were being observed. Thomas Wilson, the Norwood foreman, had indeed been making his rounds but had held back when he spotted Helena with a stranger. His loyalty to Barrett Norwood was absolute. The man had saved him from a hanging 15 years earlier and given him a position of respect and authority. If this cowboy was threatening the arrangement with Montgomery, Thomas would ensure Barrett knew about it. Helena returned to find the house in a flurry of activity. Her father had apparently moved up the timetable, and servants were preparing for Montgomery's arrival that very afternoon rather than the next day. "There you are," Barrett said when Helena entered the foyer, his tone clipped. "Go change immediately. Montgomery's train is arriving early. We'll meet him at the station in 2 hours." "Father, This is not a negotiation, Helena." Barrett cut her off. "Montgomery is bringing his personal attorney to finalize the contracts. Everything is in motion." As Helena climbed the stairs to her room, a sense of panic began to rise within her. The timeline was accelerating, narrowing her options with each passing minute. She changed mechanically into the blue silk dress her father had purchased for this occasion, allowing her maid to arrange her hair in an elaborate style that felt like a cage around her face. When she descended to join her father in the carriage, Helena caught sight of Thomas speaking urgently to him on the front porch. Barrett's expression darkened as he listened, and when he turned to look at Helena, there was a coldness in his eyes that sent a chill through her. "Get in," he ordered once Thomas had departed. "We will discuss your morning activities after we return with Montgomery." The train station buzzed with the usual activity, but a hush fell as Barrett Norwood's carriage arrived. Helena sat rigidly beside her father, acutely aware of the whispers and glances directed their way. When the Denver train pulled in amid a cloud of steam and coal smoke, Helena's heart seemed to stop in her chest. Jasper Montgomery descended from the private car with surprising agility for a man of his years. Though in his 60s, he carried himself with the practiced ease of one accustomed to command. His silver hair was immaculately groomed, his suit clearly tailored to his trim frame, and his eyes sharp and assessing found Helena immediately. "Norwood," he greeted Barrett with a curt nod before turning his full attention to Helena. "Miss Norwood, you're even lovelier than I remembered." Helena forced herself to extend her hand, which Montgomery took, brushing his lips across her knuckles in a gesture that left her skin crawling despite its propriety. "Mr. Montgomery," she acknowledged, her voice barely audible above the station's noise. "Come," Barrett interrupted. "We have much to discuss at the house." The carriage ride was an exercise in silent torture for Helena. Montgomery sat opposite her, his gaze rarely leaving her face, while her father detailed the wedding arrangements. A judge would perform the ceremony on Sunday, followed by a reception for the town's prominent citizens. Montgomery would then take Helena to his estate near Denver, where she would assume her duties as mistress of his household. Not once was Helena asked for her input or preferences. Not once did either man acknowledge that her life was being completely reshaped by their negotiations. Back at the house, Helena was dismissed to the parlor while the men retired to her father's study with Montgomery's attorney. Through the partially open door, she caught fragments of their conversation discussions of her dowry, of property transfers, of Montgomery's financial provisions for her should she be widowed. They spoke of her as if she were a prized mare being sold at auction. Helena sat in numb silence until a commotion at the front door drew her attention. Thomas entered, half dragging a struggling figure, Cole Pritchard. "Found him sneaking around the property line," Thomas announced, shoving Cole forward as Barrett emerged from his study to investigate the disturbance. Cole's eyes found Helena's immediately, a silent communication passing between them before he squared his shoulders to face her father. "Mr. Norwood," he said evenly, "I came to speak with you about an important matter." Barrett studied the dusty cowboy with unconcealed disdain. "Thomas tells me you've been engaging my daughter in clandestine meetings. That seems the more pertinent matter to address." Montgomery appeared in the doorway of the study, his cold eyes taking in the scene with calculating interest. "Who is this?" he demanded. "No one of consequence," Barrett replied dismissively. "A drifter who apparently has designs on inserting himself into business that doesn't concern him." Cole's gaze never wavered from Barrett. "Your daughter's happiness concerns me greatly, sir, as it should you." A harsh laugh escaped Barrett. "Her happiness? What fantasy have you been spinning for her? That you, a saddle tramp with nothing to your name, could provide for her better than the arrangements I've made?" He gestured toward Montgomery. "Mr. Montgomery can give Helena security, position, comfort, everything a woman could want." "Except choice," Cole countered, echoing Helena's words from her conversation with her father. "Except love?" The word hung in the air like a challenge. Helena felt her breath catch as Cole continued, his voice steady despite Thomas's grip on his arm. "I came here today to speak to you man to man," Cole said, "to tell you that your daughter deserves the right to determine her own future, to marry where her heart leads her." "And I suppose her heart leads to you?" Barrett sneered. Cole glanced at Helena, and something in his expression softened. "That's for her to say, not me. I'm merely suggesting that she deserves that choice." Montgomery stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. Norwood, control this situation immediately." Barrett nodded to Thomas. "Take him to the shed. We'll let the sheriff deal with him for trespassing." "No!" Helena cried, finding her voice at last. She moved to Cole's side, placing herself between him and her father. "Father, please, don't do this." "Step aside, Helena," Barrett ordered. "This man has filled your head with nonsense. The agreements are drawn up. You will marry Montgomery on Sunday as planned." Helena felt a strange calm settle over her, the kind that comes only when one has nothing left to lose. "No," she said quietly but firmly. "I won't." The silence that followed was absolute. Barrett stared at his daughter as if she'd grown a second head. "What did you say?" he asked dangerously. "I said no," Helena repeated, her voice stronger. "I will not marry Mr. Montgomery, not on Sunday, not ever." Montgomery's face contorted with fury. "Control your daughter, Norwood, or the deal is off." "There is no deal," Helena declared before her father could respond. "You cannot trade me like cattle. I am not yours to sell, father, nor yours to buy, Mr. Montgomery." Barrett's hand shot out, gripping Helena's arm painfully. "You are my daughter. You will do as I say." Cole moved with surprising speed, breaking free from Thomas's slackened grip and inserting himself between Helena and her father. "Take your hand off her," he said, his voice low and dangerous. For a moment the tableau held Barrett's hand frozen in midair, Cole standing protective and unwavering, Helena breathing heavily behind him, Montgomery and his attorney watching with expressions of scandalized disbelief. Then Barrett's other hand moved to his waistband, where his revolver was holstered. "I will give you one chance to walk out that door and never return," he told Cole. "Otherwise, I'll have you arrested, or worse." "Father, please," Helena begged, stepping around Cole despite his attempt to keep her behind him. "This isn't who you are. Mother wouldn't want this for me. She'd want me to marry for love, as she did with you." Something flickered in Barrett's eyes at the mention of his late wife, a moment of doubt, perhaps, or a ghost of memory. But it hardened again almost immediately. "Your mother was a romantic fool who died young and left us vulnerable," he said harshly. "I won't let you make the same mistake." It's not a mistake to follow your heart, Helena insisted. It's not a mistake to want a partnership rather than an arrangement. You loved Mother, I know you did. Can't you understand that I want the same chance at happiness? Barrett's gaze shifted between his daughter's pleading face and Cole's resolute one. And you think you'll find happiness with him? A man you've known for what, 2 days? Don't be naive, Helena. I think I deserve the opportunity to find out, Helena replied steadily. On my terms, not yours. Montgomery, who had been watching the exchange with mounting fury, finally erupted. Enough of this melodrama. Norwood, either you honor our agreement or I'll ruin you. I'll call in every debt, block every cattle contract, ensure you never do business in Colorado again. Barrett's face paled slightly at the threat, but Cole spoke before he could respond. Mr. Montgomery, he said, turning to face the older man directly. Perhaps you don't remember me. We met 6 years ago near Pueblo. You tried to hang me for reclaiming a horse you'd acquired through questionable means. Montgomery's eyes narrowed as he studied Cole more carefully. Pritchard, he said finally, recognition dawning. The horse thief who slipped the noose. The rightful owner who was saved by the law, Cole corrected. The same law that might be very interested in reviewing some of your business dealings over the years. I've kept detailed records, you see, out of a sense of self-preservation. The implied threat hung heavily in the air. Montgomery's jaw worked silently for a moment before he turned to his attorney. Pack up the papers. We're leaving. Jasper, don't be hasty, Barrett began, but Montgomery cut him off with a gesture. I won't be blackmailed, and I won't take a wife who requires restraining, he snapped. Find another solution to your financial troubles, Norwood. This arrangement is terminated. With that, Montgomery stormed from the room, his attorney hurrying after him. The front door slammed with such force that a decorative plate fell from its perch on the mantelpiece, shattering on the hearth. Barrett stared at the broken china for a long moment before turning back to Helena and Cole, his expression unreadable. Are you satisfied? He asked Helena bitterly. You've just cost us everything. Montgomery will make good on his threats. We'll lose the ranch, the mine interests, everything I've built. Helena stood her ground. There are worse things to lose, Father. Barrett's shoulders sagged suddenly, as if the weight of decades had finally become too much to bear. You're so like her, he murmured, and Helena didn't need to ask who he meant. Stubborn, principled, willing to risk everything for what she believed in. Those aren't flaws, Helena said gently. No, Barrett agreed, surprising her. They're not. But they can be dangerous in a world that doesn't value them. He looked at Cole with renewed scrutiny. And you? What exactly are your intentions toward my daughter? Cole met his gaze steadily. To protect her right to make her own choices, to care for her if she'll allow it, to build something worthwhile with her, if that's what she wants. Pretty words, Barrett scoffed. But what can you offer her practically? Where will you take her? How will you support her? Father. Helena began to protest, but Cole raised a hand. It's a fair question, he said. I own land in Wyoming Territory, a modest ranch I've been building over the past 4 years. It's nothing compared to all this. He gestured to the opulent surroundings. But it's mine, free and clear. I raise horses, good ones, and I have savings enough to ensure Helena would never want for necessities. Barrett studied him for a long moment. And if I forbid this? If I assert my authority as her father? Helena tensed, but Cole's reply was measured. Then I would respect her decision, whatever it might be. But I would ask you to consider what you truly want for your daughter: obedience or happiness. They're not always the same thing. Something shifted in Barrett's expression, not surrender, exactly, but a reluctant recognition. Thomas, he called to the foreman who had been standing uncomfortably by the door throughout the confrontation. Show Mr. Pritchard out. He's free to go. Father, Helena protested. Barrett held up a hand. I need time to think, Helena, and so do you. If this man's intentions are honorable, a day's reflection won't change them. Cole looked to Helena, who gave him a small nod after a moment's hesitation. I'll respect your wishes, Mr. Norwood, he said, but I won't leave town. Not without speaking to Helena again. Barrett's mouth tightened, but he inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. As Thomas led Cole out, he paused at the door, his eyes finding Helena's once more. Her yes belongs to me alone, he said quietly, but with unmistakable conviction. Remember that, Mr. Norwood. After Cole's departure, the house fell into a strained silence. Barrett retreated to his study without another word to Helena, leaving her to wonder what he might be planning. She paced the parlor restlessly, torn between hope and fear, until eventually retiring to her room as the afternoon shadows lengthened. Hours later, a soft knock on her door roused her from her troubled thoughts. To her surprise, it was her father who entered, looking older and wearier than she had ever seen him. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair near her window. Helena nodded, watching cautiously as he settled himself with a heavy sigh. "I've been thinking about your mother," Barrett began, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "About the day I met her. Did I ever tell you that story?" Helena shook her head. Her father rarely spoke of her mother as if the pain of her loss was still too raw even after 15 years. "I was nobody then," Barrett continued, "a miner with big dreams but empty pockets. Your mother was the daughter of the local banker, educated, refined, beautiful." A small smile touched his lips at the memory. Her father had arranged for her to marry the son of a business associate, a sensible match, everyone said. Helena leaned forward slightly. "What happened?" "She refused him," Barrett replied, his eyes distant. "Caused quite the scandal. And then, to everyone's horror, she set her sights on me instead. Her father threatened to disown her, to cut her off without a penny, but she didn't care." He looked directly at Helena. "She said her heart wasn't negotiable, that her yes belonged to me alone." Helena's breath caught at the echo of Cole's words. "I fought for her," Barrett continued, "worked myself nearly to death to prove I could provide for her. And when we finally married, I promised her I'd build an empire worthy of her sacrifice." His voice broke slightly. "When she died, I convinced myself that security was the only true gift I could give you, that by arranging a match with someone powerful and wealthy, I was honoring her memory, protecting you from the struggles we faced." "But that's not what she would have wanted for me," Helena said softly. "She would have wanted me to have the same freedom she claimed for herself." Barrett nodded slowly. "Yes, I see that now." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document, which he handed to Helena. Montgomery's attorney left this behind in their hasty departure. Helena unfolded the paper, the marriage contract, torn in half. "What does this mean?" she asked, hardly daring to hope. "It means I'm giving you your mother's gift," Barrett replied. "The freedom to choose." He rose from the chair, suddenly looking uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "This Pritchard fellow, do you truly care for him?" Helena considered the question seriously. "I barely know him," she admitted, "but what I do know speaks to his character. And when I'm with him, I feel possibilities. As if my life could be more than I ever imagined." Barrett nodded, moving toward the door. "He'll be at the Double Eagle Saloon," he said. "I had Thomas find out where he's staying." Helena stared at her father in amazement. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying nothing," Barrett replied gruffly. "Except perhaps that your mother would be disappointed in me if I didn't at least allow you the chance she took for herself." He paused at the door. "Be downstairs at 8 tomorrow morning if you wish to speak with him again. Under proper supervision, of course." When he was gone, Helena pressed the torn contract to her heart, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of expectation lifting from her shoulders, replaced by the dizzying lightness of possibility. The following morning dawned clear and bright, a fitting metaphor for the new chapter unfolding in Helena's life. She dressed with particular care, selecting a simple but flattering blue dress that complemented her eyes and brought out the golden highlights in her brown hair. At precisely 8 o'clock, she descended to find her father waiting in the foyer, his expression a complex mixture of resignation and something that might have been pride. "You look lovely," he said gruffly, "your mother's daughter, through and through." Helena smiled, touching his arm gently. "Thank you, father." "For everything." Barrett cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Yes. Well, the carriage is waiting." The ride into town was quiet but not tense. Helena gazed out at the familiar landscape with new eyes, seeing not the boundaries of her prison, but the beauty of a world opening before her. When they reached the main street, Barrett directed the driver to stop in front of the hotel rather than the saloon. "I sent word that we would meet him here," Barrett explained at Helena's questioning look. "More appropriate for a lady of your standing." Helena bit back a smile at her father's concession to propriety even in this unconventional situation. They entered the hotel's small restaurant to find Cole already waiting, dressed in clean clothes with his dark hair still damp from washing, looking decidedly more presentable than during their previous encounters. He rose immediately when they entered, his eyes finding Helena's with an intensity that made her heart skip. But his greeting was properly directed to her father. "Mr. Norwood," he said, with a respectful nod. "Thank you for arranging this meeting." Barrett grunted in acknowledgement, pulling out a chair for Helena before taking his own seat. A strained silence fell over the table until the hotel owner's wife appeared with coffee and a plate of fresh biscuits. "Now then," Barrett began, once they were alone again. "I believe we need to establish some parameters for this situation." Cole set down his coffee cup. "What did you have in mind, sir?" Barrett fixed him with a hard stare. "My daughter seems to believe you're a man of honor. I'm less easily convinced. If you truly care for her welfare, you'll understand my concerns." "Of course," Cole agreed readily. "In your position, I would feel the same." Something in his straightforward response seemed to mollify Barrett slightly. "Helena has led a sheltered life," he continued. "She has no experience of hardship or of managing on modest means. Your ranch in Wyoming, you say it's established?" "Yes, sir," Cole confirmed. 300 acres along the eastern slope of the Medicine Bow Range. Good water, good grazing. I've built a solid house and outbuildings. It's not luxurious, but it's comfortable and growing." Barrett nodded thoughtfully. "And you run it alone?" "I have 2 hired hands year-round, more during the busier seasons. My foreman, Luke, has been with me since I purchased the land. He's trustworthy, capable." The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with Barrett probing every aspect of Cole's background, finances, and plans for the future. To Helena's surprise, Cole answered each inquiry patiently and completely, neither defensive nor boastful, simply forthright. Eventually, Barrett sat back with a sigh. "You understand that this is all highly irregular. In normal circumstances, there would be a proper courtship period, family introductions, time for everyone to become acquainted." "These aren't normal circumstances," Cole pointed out quietly. "But I'm willing to abide by whatever conditions you feel are necessary for Helena's well-being and reputation." Barrett glanced at his daughter, who had remained silent throughout the interrogation, allowing the men to find their own path toward understanding. "Helena, what are your thoughts?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I would like the opportunity to know Mr. Pritchard better," she said carefully, "to determine if what I feel might grow into something lasting." "And how do you propose to do that with him living in Wyoming and you here?" Barrett challenged. Helena exchanged a glance with Cole before answering. I was thinking I might visit his ranch. With proper chaperonage, of course. Barrett's eyebrows shot up. Out of the question. Actually, sir, Cole interjected, I have a suggestion, if I may. When Barrett nodded grudgingly, he continued. My neighbor to the north is Mrs. Eleanor Simmons, a widow of impeccable reputation who runs a small but successful cattle operation. She's been like a mother to me since I settled in the area. If Helena were to stay with Mrs. Simmons while visiting the region, her reputation would be entirely protected. Barrett frowned, considering. And how long would this visit last? A month, Helena suggested. Long enough to determine if Wyoming and its possibilities are truly what I want. Barrett's gaze shifted between his daughter and Cole, weighing options and consequences. Finally, he seemed to reach a decision. 3 weeks, he countered, with letters sent regularly, and I reserve the right to come collect you myself if I'm not satisfied with the arrangement. Helena's heart soared at this unexpected concession. Thank you, Father, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Barrett turned his attention fully to Cole, his expression hardening. If any harm comes to her, any harm whatsoever, there is nowhere in this country you could hide from me. Do we understand each other? Perfectly, Cole replied, without hesitation. I give you my word that Helena's safety and honor will be my highest priority. A week later, Helena found herself on a northbound train, watching the Colorado landscape give way to the windswept plains and eventually the rising silhouettes of Wyoming's mountains. Seated across from her was Mrs. Abigail Porter, the prim widow of her father's former business partner, who had agreed to serve as her traveling companion and initial chaperone. Barrett had insisted on this additional precaution, unwilling to entrust his daughter entirely to the care of a stranger like Mrs. Simmons until he could verify her suitability himself. Cole had traveled ahead to prepare for their arrival and to ensure Mrs. Simmons was ready to receive her guests. As the train chugged steadily northward, Helena alternated between nervous anticipation and quiet confidence in her decision. The past week had been a whirlwind of preparations and adjustments to her new reality. Montgomery had indeed begun making good on his threats, calling in loans and canceling contracts with Barrett's businesses. But to Helena's surprise, her father had faced these challenges with a resilience she hadn't known he possessed, finding alternative partners and renegotiating terms with a determination that seemed to have been reinvigorated by their recent confrontations. It's quite irregular, you know, Mrs. Porter commented, breaking into Helena's thoughts. Your father allowing you to travel to visit a man you barely know. In my day, such an arrangement would have been unthinkable. Helena smiled politely. Times change, Mrs. Porter. And my father trusts my judgment. The older woman sniffed disapprovingly but returned to her book without further comment. Helena turned back to the window, watching as the landscape transformed around them, each mile carrying her closer to a future she could only dimly imagine but increasingly desired. When the train finally pulled into the small station at Laramie, Helena's heart leapt at the sight of Cole waiting on the platform, his tall figure easily distinguishable among the small crowd. Beside him stood a stout, silver-haired woman whom Helena guessed must be Mrs. Simmons. As soon as the train came to a complete stop, Cole approached to help Helena and Mrs. Porter descend from their car. Welcome to Wyoming territory, Miss Norwood, he said formally, though his eyes conveyed a warmth that made Helena's cheeks flush. Mrs. Porter, it's a pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Simmons stepped forward, her weathered face creasing in a genuine smile. Helena, dear, I'm Eleanor Simmons. I'm so pleased you've come to visit our little corner of the world. She turned to Mrs. Porter with the same warm greeting. And Mrs. Porter, you must be exhausted after such a long journey. I've prepared rooms for both of you at my home. Mrs. Porter regarded the older woman with cautious approval, clearly reassessing her expectations of a frontier widow. Mrs. Simmons, with her neat appearance and cultivated speech, clearly came from good stock despite her current surroundings. The journey from Laramie to the neighboring ranches took the better part of the afternoon. Helena marveled at the vastness of the landscape so different from the more contained valleys of her Colorado home. Here, the land seemed to stretch endlessly beneath an immense sky, broken only by distant mountain ranges and occasional stands of pine. "It's beautiful," she murmured to Cole, who rode alongside the wagon carrying the women and their luggage. "It can be harsh," he replied honestly. "Winters are long and brutal. Summers bring drought some years, flooding others. But yes, it's beautiful in a way that gets into your blood." Helena studied his profile as he spoke, noting the quiet pride in his voice. This was a man who had chosen his place in the world deliberately, who had built something from nothing through determination and hard work. The more she learned about him, the more her initial attraction deepened into something more substantial. Mrs. Apren Simmons's ranch house came into view first, a sturdy two-story structure surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings and corrals. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome shade. "Home sweet home," Mrs. Simmons announced. "For you ladies at least. Cole's place is just over that rise, about a mile further." Helena caught Cole's eye, a question in her gaze. "You'll see it tomorrow," he promised, "after you've rested from your journey." The next 2 days passed in a pleasant routine that allowed Helena to become acquainted with Mrs. Simmons and the rhythm of ranch life. The older woman proved to be a delightful hostess, practical and no nonsense about the realities of frontier living, yet cultured and well-read from her earlier life in Boston. Mrs. Porter, initially skeptical, found herself increasingly at ease in Mrs. Simmons's company, particularly when they discovered a shared passion for quilting. By the third day, she had relaxed her vigilant chaperoning enough to allow Helena to accompany Cole on a tour of his property, while the older women remained engrossed in comparing quilting patterns. Cole's ranch, when Helena finally saw it, surpassed her expectations. The main house was smaller than her father's mansion, but solidly built and thoughtfully designed, with large windows that captured the sweeping views and a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. "I built most of it myself," Cole explained as he showed her through the rooms. "Took 2 years to get it just right." The interior was simple but comfortable, with well-crafted furniture and surprising touches of refinement, bookshelves filled with volumes of history, poetry, and practical guides to ranching. A small piano in the corner of the sitting room, framed sketches of horses and landscapes on the walls. "It's lovely," Helena said sincerely. "It feels like a home, not just a house." Cole's expression softened. "That means a lot, coming from you." The tour continued outside, where Cole showed her the stables housing his prized breeding stock, the corrals where young horses were trained, the barn and workshops where ranch equipment was maintained. Helena was struck by the evident care and planning that had gone into every aspect of the operation. "You've built something remarkable here," she told him, as they paused by a fence overlooking a pasture where several mares grazed with their foals. "Something to be proud of." "It's still growing," Cole replied. "Each year gets a little easier, a little more established." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "It's a good place to build a life, to raise a family someday." Helena's heart quickened at the implication behind his words. "I believe it would be," she agreed softly. As the days passed, Helena fell into the rhythms of ranch life with surprising ease. She rose early, helped Mrs. Simmons with household tasks in the mornings, and spent afternoons exploring the area, sometimes with Cole as her guide, sometimes sketching on her own within sight of the house. Mrs. Porter, satisfied that Mrs. Simmons was indeed a suitable chaperone and that Cole's intentions appeared honorable, departed after the first week, returning to Colorado with a detailed letter from Helena to her father. Without Mrs. Porter's constraining presence, Helena found herself growing even more comfortable in her new surroundings. She began to assist with some of the lighter ranch work, learning to collect eggs from the henhouse, to churn butter, even to help with the gentler horses under Cole's careful instruction. Each new skill mastered gave her a sense of accomplishment, unlike anything she'd experienced in her more sheltered life. Most evenings were spent at Mrs. Simmons's home, with Cole joining them for supper and conversation afterward. Occasionally, they dined at Cole's ranch, with his foreman Luke and the other hands joining them at the long table in the kitchen, filling the house with laughter and stories that gave Helena glimpses into Cole's life and character through the eyes of those who knew him best. It was during one such evening, as they sat on Cole's porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple, that Helena realized she had made her decision. "I don't want to go back," she said quietly. "Not permanently, at least." Cole turned to look at her, his expression carefully controlled. "Are you sure? This life is very different from what you're accustomed to." Helena nodded, meeting his gaze steadily. "I've never felt more alive, more purposeful, than I have these past 2 weeks. In Colorado, I was existing. Here, I'm living." Cole reached for her hand, his touch sending a now familiar warmth through her. "Helena, I need to be absolutely clear about something." His voice was serious, his blue eyes intent on hers. "If you stay, if you choose this life, I want it to be with me. Not as my guest or my neighbor, but as my wife. I know it's fast, perhaps too fast, but I've known from the moment I saw you that you were someone special." Helena's breath caught in her throat. "Is this a proposal, Mr. Pritchard?" she asked, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "It is," Cole confirmed, sliding from his chair to one knee before her, still holding her hand in his. "I love you, Helena Norwood. I love your courage, your kindness, your willingness to embrace new challenges. I want to build a life with you, to face whatever comes together. Will you marry me?" Helena looked into his upturned face, illuminated by the last golden rays of sunset, and felt a certainty unlike anything she'd experienced before. "Yes," she said simply. "My yes belongs to you alone, Cole Pritchard, now and always." His smile was radiant as he rose, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle yet filled with promise, the perfect beginning to the shared journey stretching before them. The next morning, Helena wrote to her father explaining her decision and inviting him to Wyoming for the wedding, which they had tentatively planned for the following month. Cole added his own letter, formally requesting Barrett's blessing and assuring him that Helena would be cherished and respected as his wife. Barrett's response came faster than either had anticipated. He would arrive within the week, his telegram stated, to assess the situation personally. Helena wavered between anxiety and hope as she prepared for her father's visit, uncertain which version of Barrett Norwood would arrive, the controlling businessman or the father who had begun to recognize her right to choose her own path. When Barrett's stagecoach finally arrived, Helena was waiting at the station with both Cole and Mrs. Simmons. Her father descended looking travel-worn but determined, his sharp eyes taking in the scene before him with his usual assessing gaze. "Father," Helena greeted him, stepping forward to embrace him. After a moment's hesitation, Barrett returned the gesture, holding her perhaps a fraction longer than usual before releasing her to shake Cole's hand. "Pritchard," he acknowledged, "you've been taking good care of my daughter, I trust?" "I've been trying to, sir," Cole replied honestly, "though she's proven quite capable of taking care of herself." A faint smile touched Barrett's lips as he glanced at Helena. Her mother was the same way. He turned to Mrs. Simmons, who introduced herself with her customary warmth. The next few days were a careful dance of observation and evaluation as Barrett inspected Cole's ranch, questioned his business practices, and watched the interaction between his daughter and her chosen partner. Helena could sense her father's internal struggle, the businessman in him, noting the modest scale of Cole's operation compared to his own empire, while the father in him couldn't help but observe Helena's evident happiness and the genuine respect Cole showed her. On the third day of his visit, Barrett requested a private conversation with Cole. The two men rode out to the furthest boundary of the ranch, where they dismounted by a stream to water their horses. "My daughter seems determined to marry you," Barrett began without preamble. "She's always been stubborn." "She knows her own mind," Cole agreed. "It's one of the things I admire most about her." Barrett studied him thoughtfully. "You understand that in marrying Helena, you're not gaining access to my fortune. Her dowry will be modest enough to ensure she's never destitute, but not enough to significantly expand your operation here." "I've never wanted your money, Mr. Norwood," Cole replied, meeting the older man's gaze directly. "Just your daughter's hand, freely given." "So you say now," Barrett countered. "But when winter comes and supplies run low, when foals die or markets crash, will you regret not having married someone who could bring more to the marriage than just herself?" Cole's expression hardened slightly. "Sir, with all due respect, you fundamentally misunderstand what Helena brings to any relationship. Her intelligence, her adaptability, her courage, these are worth more than any financial dowry. I built this ranch from nothing because I wanted the satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. Having Helena as my partner in that ongoing work is all I could ask for." Barrett was silent for a long moment, absently stroking his horse's neck as he considered Cole's words. "You truly love her," he said finally. "It wasn't a question, but a realization." "More than I thought possible," Cole confirmed. Barrett nodded slowly. "Then you have my blessing," he said, the words clearly difficult for him despite his decision. "But know this: if you ever make her unhappy, if you ever fail in your duty to her, there will be consequences." "I would expect nothing less," Cole replied seriously, "and I give you my word that Helena's happiness will always be my priority." When they returned to the ranch, Helena was waiting anxiously on the porch. The sight of both men returning with relaxed postures and engaged in apparently civil conversation sent a wave of relief through her. When her father dismounted and approached her, his expression was softer than she had seen it in years. "It seems I'll be attending a wedding after all," he said gruffly, "though not the one I originally anticipated." Helena's eyes filled with tears as she embraced him. "Thank you, Father," she whispered. "This means everything to me." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Laramie. It was a simple affair by the standards of Helena's upbringing, but perfect in its sincerity and joy. Mrs. Simmons had rallied the neighboring ranchers and townspeople to decorate the church with wildflowers and evergreen boughs, creating a natural beauty that surpassed any formal arrangement Helena had ever seen. She wore a gown of ivory silk that her father had arranged to be sent from Denver, his wedding gift to her, along with her mother's pearl necklace and a deed to 50 acres adjoining Cole's property, which he had quietly purchased during his visit. As Helena walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes found Cole's waiting figure at the altar. The love and promise in his gaze made everything else fade away: the years of constraint, the near miss with Montgomery, the uncertainties of frontier life ahead. None of it mattered in comparison to the certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the minister asked. Barrett's voice was steady as he replied, "She gives herself with her father's blessing." Helena squeezed his arm gratefully before placing her hand in Cole's outstretched one, stepping forward into her chosen future. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. the traditional vows taking on new meaning for Helena as she pledged herself to the man who had given her the greatest gift of all, the freedom to choose her own path and the steadfast support to walk it confidently. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Cole's kiss was both tender and filled with promise, sealing their commitment before the assembled witnesses. The celebration afterward at Mrs. Carstairs Simmons's ranch lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing, abundant food, and the warm camaraderie of a community welcoming its newest member. Helena moved through the festivities in a daze of happiness, scarcely able to believe that this was now her life, these people, her neighbors, this remarkable man, her husband. As the party wound down, Barrett found a moment alone with his daughter. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. "She always believed in following your heart, even when it led to unexpected places." "I wish she could be here," Helena replied, leaning her head against her father's shoulder as they had when she was a child. "She is, in a way," Barrett assured her. "In you, in every choice you make with courage and conviction." He cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the emotion of the moment. "I've made arrangements to visit twice a year, if that's agreeable to you and Cole. And of course, you're always welcome in Colorado." "Thank you," Helena said, recognizing the enormous concession this represented for a man who had never willingly relinquished control of anything in his life. For everything. Later that night, after the guests had departed and they had returned to what was now their home together, Cole and Helena stood on the porch, gazing up at the star-filled Wyoming sky. "Happy?" Cole asked softly, his arm around her waist, drawing her close against his side. "Beyond words," Helena replied, turning in his embrace to face him. "This feels like the beginning of a grand adventure." "It is," Cole agreed, his hands coming up to frame her face gently. "One day at a time, 1 year at a time, building something lasting together." As his lips found hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, Helena knew with absolute certainty that her decision had been the right one. Here, in this place, with this man, she had found not just freedom, but belonging, the perfect harmony of independence and partnership that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. 5 years later, Helena stood on that same porch, watching as Cole taught their 3-year-old daughter, Margaret, to sit on her first pony. Barrett Norwood sat in a rocking chair nearby, his once dark hair now liberally streaked with silver, smiling indulgently as his granddaughter squealed with delight when the gentle pony took its first steps with her aboard. "Careful now," Barrett called. "Keep your back straight, Maggie, just like your mother taught you." Helena smiled, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her abdomen where their second child was growing. The ranch had prospered under Cole and Helena's joint stewardship, expanding thoughtfully each year. Cole's reputation as a breeder of exceptional horses had spread throughout the territory, bringing buyers from as far as California and Texas. Helena had found her own niche, using her artistic talents to illustrate a series of popular children's books about life in the West, work that allowed her to contribute to their success while still being present for their daughter. Barrett had surprised everyone by selling most of his Colorado holdings 2 years earlier and purchasing a smaller ranch just 10 miles from Cole and Helena's property. Retirement, he called it, though he still maintained enough business interests to keep his mind active. The true reason, Helena knew, was the pull of family, the irresistible gravitational force of his granddaughter's adoration, and the hard-won respect that had developed between him and Cole over the years. As Cole lifted Maggie from the pony and set her on his shoulders, their laughter carrying across the yard, Helena felt a contentment so complete it nearly brought tears to her eyes. This life chosen freely, built with love and determination, was richer and more fulfilling than any she could have imagined that day in Whispering Creek, when her father's gunshot had seemed to foreclose all her options. Cole caught her watching and gave her that smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. He said something to Barrett, who nodded and reached up to take his granddaughter, before crossing the yard to join Helena on the porch. "What are you thinking about so seriously, Mrs. Pritchard?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "About choices," Helena replied, leaning into his embrace. "About how a single moment of courage can change everything." Cole's hand joined hers over the new life growing within her. "Any regrets?" Helena smiled up at the man who had taught her the true meaning of partnership, whose strength had never sought to diminish hers but rather to complement it, whose love had never been a cage but always a horizon expanding before her. "Not one," she said with perfect conviction. "My yes has always belonged to you alone." As his lips met hers in a kiss that still held all the promise of their first, Helena knew that some stories, the very best ones, didn't end with happily ever after. They simply continued, day by day, choice by choice, building something beautiful and enduring together.